introduce our esteemed speaker, Joanne.
For our devotions today, Jane and I thought we'll just start with a prayer, and that will be our devotions. And this prayer came from this book, Women Pray, and it was given to me by clergy years ago, this book. So it's full prayers, so I chose one, and this is it. Dear God, help us to live together as people of one family, caring for the needs and concerns of others. Help us to be gentle, walking softly with one another, and help us to be as eager to forgive others as we are to seek forgiveness. Help us to know no barriers of creed or race, that our love may be like yours, a love that sees all men and all women of all nations on earth as your children. We ask this prayer in the name of our church family. May your blessings be on each one of us now and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Well, I don't think any one of us will ever forget where we were the morning of 9/11 and how we learned of the horrors. I guess, can hardly even think about it. But they say that life is not a spectator sport. And if there was ever a participant in life, it is our speaker, Tom Etzel. He's lost 2 loved ones, and he's going to tell us how this has changed his life and the work he is doing. We're very glad you're here, Tom.
Thank you, Jane.
I thought you were going to sit there.
So I thought maybe the best way to do this today, because I tend to be soft-spoken, and I'm going to reference some materials, but I made copies for everyone. So maybe you, if you'd like to, you can follow along as I go through it. And then you'll learn about starting on 9/11, the journey, and then we'll delve into the Global Peace Building Foundation. So it's a story. It's actually taken from a book I've just finished writing.
Tom, would you hold it a little close?
Sure.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's from, there you go.
That's
Much
good.
better.
I've just finished writing a book, and it'll be published this year. And it's called Within Our Grasp, Changing Ourselves in the World. So it's the story of 9/11, and so you're going to get kind of a short version today. I welcome you to ask questions and interrupt as I go along, and I may delve off here or there, but don't be shy, so we could interact as we go along. I think it'd be more fruitful that way. So.
Thank you. Oh, my goodness. You really, thank you.
Everybody have a copy? Yeah, one more? You need one too. So, the first page of your handout, it's numbered page 35, but it's the part 2 of the book. And it's my favorite reference to scripture. And I learned this from Tracy Keenan when she was here. And she said, it's not so popular for you to tell your children this verse. But it's, are you, anyone familiar with it? Do you see? It goes, we also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given us. So, my story is full of hope. And it's also, for me, a living proof of the Holy Spirit and how the Holy Spirit has affected my life. So I'm going to start with the introduction to the book, which is page 2 of your handout. And Jane referenced 9/11, so this is can be painful. At precisely 8:46 a.m. on the 11th of September 2001, as the sun cast its golden rays upon the bustling metropolis of New York City, the serene stillness was shattered by a deafening roar. With a chilling precision, American Airlines Flight 11 pierced the majestic North Tower of the renowned World Trade Center. The impact unleashed an inferno of chaos and destruction. A cascade of shattered glass and twisted steel rained down on the streets below, sending shockwaves of terror through the hearts of onlookers and reverberating across the globe. This was the first of 4 related attacks that morning, now commonly referred to as the 9/11 attacks. By the way, this book is written for my grandchildren. So you see there's a history that they'll learn from this. My wife Phyllis and I lost our 25-year-old niece, Katie McCloskey, that morning. Our children, Kristen, Katie, and Mark, lost their cousin. Katie McCloskey was like a daughter to Phyllis and me, and our children loved her like a sister. She was so young, with her whole life ahead of her. Her death was gruesome, tragic, and traumatizing. That day, my family lost its innocence and was forced to face the horrors of terrorism. To this day, I cannot erase the mental images of the planes flying into the buildings. 5 years later, Phyllis, our twins, and I visited Ground Zero, the site where the World Trade Center, I may have said 5 years, I meant 5 months. 5 months later, we visited the World Trade Center site where Katie McCloskey had worked and died. The area was an immense, expansive crater with the surrounding buildings scorched black with windows missing or shattered. It reminded me of a war zone. 10 years after that, Phyllis, Kristen, Katie, and I would attend the dedication ceremony of the 9/11 memorial, and I was grateful when our country memorialized those lost that day. My family considers that sacred ground our beloved Katie's final resting place. I got through the hard part. How I looked at life changed forever when my niece died that day. While many Americans sought retribution, on September 14th, 2001, Congress authorized military retaliation against Al-Qaeda and its Taliban enablers in Afghanistan, with only one lawmaker voting against it. My thinking was on a different path. I began my quest for meaning in the face of this tragedy. I wanted to learn more about why the men had hijacked those planes on 9/11 that caused so much destruction, death, and suffering. What led them to resort to this violent action? Compelled to find the answers, I yearned to determine the root cause, and I began to wonder, what can I do to contribute to a more peaceful world in the future, to prevent another 9/11 from happening? God's presence enveloped me from the outset of this miraculous journey. I opened my heart and allowed myself to be led by the Spirit. That's a key sentence. I opened my heart and allowed myself to be led by the Spirit. And that wasn't easy, which I'll learn as I read on. My niece Katie appeared to me in a dream within a week of her death, and her words comforted me. I don't know if any of you have ever had that happen, where you lost a loved one and you had a dream. I understand it's a common thing, but what has been uncommon, that she appears, signs of her presence to this day, all these years later. She became my Angel Katie at that moment, and Angel Katie has continued to connect with me from that point forward to the present day. Searching for meaningful direction for the next 5 years after 9/11, I traveled 3 times to Rhinebeck, New York, to attend workshops at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies. Anyone familiar with Omega Institute? I see Glenn should be here.
Rhinebeck.
You were Rhinebeck, yeah. There were 3 main takeaways from these workshops: that we as human beings can develop nonviolent relationships by listening to one another, developing empathy, and building trust and respect. How important it is to live the second part of your life with purpose, finding your passion and leaving a legacy. And that I needed to trust myself, follow my intuition and insight, and allow myself to be led and guided. Again, there's that being led and guided. So we could make a sermon out of that, couldn't we? Huh? So I'm on page 4 now, if anyone's following. These 3 takeaways would be amplified in December 2006 when I attended a graduation ceremony at La Roche College, a small liberal arts college in Pittsburgh with a global perspective. The keynote speaker was an alumnus of the Fletcher School, a Tufts University graduate school, spoke on global issues, focused on global peace. Her speech was the spark that ignited my passion. When Phyllis and I returned home that evening, already aware of the Fletcher School was a world-renowned graduate school of international relations, I scurried up the stairs to my home office computer to check out its website. I was pleased to discover that the Fletcher School offered a mid-career program that seemed ideal for my needs. My heart said yes, but my brain said no, largely because of the $62,500 price tag. That tuition cost brought a lot of trepidation. Just the thought of it triggered memories of an adolescent trauma, when my father's business failed and my family abruptly became poor. My sense of safety and security had evaporated overnight, and the experience had left an everlasting scar. It took me 18 months to work through my fear of taking on such an enormous undertaking and expense at my stage of life. I consulted with Phyllis and with other members of my family, as well as with friends, mentors, and spiritual advisors. I moved cautiously forward and eventually found the courage to apply for admission. I was placed on a waiting list for a year, and in May of 2009, I gained admission into the Fletcher School. At nearly 55, I was the oldest student in my class. I proceeded with the plan despite my wife's concerns and objections. It was the first time in our 32 years of marriage that we did not find a resolution to a dispute. Phyllis was furious. See how honest this is, this book? How could I blame her? I would be taking on a significant amount of debt while we were still paying off our children's college loans. And I had no concrete plan of what I was going to accomplish by this expensive and time-consuming undertaking. Our marriage was challenged as it had never been before, and it would be a source of discord for the next decade of our life together. No exaggeration, the next decade. Phyllis thought I had gone crazy, and surely there was some craziness going on. God was meddling in my life. Phyllis had often teased me about being insanely optimistic, trusting, and naive. But this time I had pushed the envelope. Never had I acted on a wing and a prayer, but I now took a leap of faith, inspired by a force beyond my control. That's the Holy Spirit. I found a portal to a whole new world on that first day of class at the Fletcher schools. With classmates from all over the world, it felt as if I was sitting in the General Assembly at the United Nations. I was surrounded by exceptional students, united by a common trait, open-mindedness combined with intellectual curiosity. Oh, how so refreshing. And the accents you would hear in that room. French, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, it was just unbelievable. They probably thought I had an accent too, coming from Pittsburgh. My Fletcher School experience, it was a one-year program. My Fletcher School experience would ultimately broaden my mind, introduce me to a global peace-building community, and lead me down an altruistic path. I faced challenges. I had not been in school for 32 years, for example, and technology had changed quite a lot since. But I found the vision I was seeking early in the first term when one of our professors discussed the diplomacy at the grassroots or local community level. This, I believe, was something I could do. Now we're starting to get into the meat of the Global Peace Building Foundation. I would go on to learn about the contact theory, a central tenet of peace building. This is a theory of change that emphasizes intergroup contact and the development of personal relationships on a more intimate level, to break down stereotyping and prejudice and enemy images. I would see that the organizations I researched while writing my thesis were providing an antidote to hatred, fear, and violent dehumanizing behavior by teaching youth and children how to get to know each other as human beings across ethnic, cultural, and religious differences. I realized I too could make a difference. I could create a charitable organization, a public foundation, global in scope, to help create awareness all over the world and raise money to support these global grassroots peace-building efforts. I experienced a vision of the real possibility of how individual transformations can have a ripple effect on peace in the world. My thesis became the cornerstone of the Global Peacebuilding Foundation, GPBF, which I founded 6 weeks after I completed my studies at the Fletcher School. I knew after I finished the studies I had to do it right away, or else I would have procrastinated and found all the reasons why not to do it, because I knew this would be a significant change in my life. from that point forward. Our date of incorporation was September 11th, 2010, 9 years after my niece Katie's death. The organization's mission is to contribute to the building of global peace by supporting organizations and projects that restore, rebuild, and transform relationships that have been broken due to prejudices, stereotyping, hatreds, and fears that may have accumulated over generations. This book, I'm referencing my book, is the story of the journey I took to find my path, to manifest my voice. And if there is anything that journey has taught me, it is that anyone can undertake it for themselves. You too can overcome your fear, release the burden that is holding you back, step out from your isolation and frustration, follow your passion, and discover your unique voice. That's to my grandchildren there, reference. You know, for them, some point in life, they'll probably be interested in me. The oldest is 10, the youngest is almost a year. And I'm hoping at some point they'll pick up this book and read it, and they'll be able to guide their life from this journey. So, any questions to this point? Everybody can hear okay? Yeah, Gwen?
Did you live out at the job? Oh, sorry. Did you live out at Tufts? Or when you were in school, did you live out at Fletcher in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Or don't you want to talk about?
No, I will. I think it's kind of amusing, actually, because...
I wondered if your wife went with you, or?
Oh, no, she didn't. We were speaking, though. You know, it wasn't that bad. But I had to laugh because here I am in a dorm room at age 55 years old, you know? It was funny. But we had, the way the program was a one-year program, and it was a combination of on campus and then remote, you know, online learning. So 2 weeks in the beginning we were on campus at Tufts in Boston. Then 2 weeks in the middle of the year was an international residency in Lisbon, Portugal. So we were there, and then at the end we finished again at Tufts in Boston. So, and then the remote learning, which, you know, this is in 2010. You know how the technology is just unbelievable. They didn't have Zoom back then, but they had what's it called? Skype.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Skype. So we had regular meetings every week with our team. It was a class of 35 students, and they broke us into teams of 5 or 6 people. And so we had regular meetings throughout the week, and a required meeting on Sunday. It was Sunday mornings for me. And so you use the technology to communicate. And lectures were on video, and so there was a lot of interaction throughout the week remotely. So you weren't isolated. That's one thing I was worried about is you study on campus and then you come back and you're isolated. And that wasn't the case at all with the team approach. So, and Gwen, did you have a question?
Yeah, you said you left the job when you went to study?
No, I still had and still have my practice.
Oh, I see.
But I was able to, the way the program, the timing of the academic year, my residencies did not conflict with my busy time of year, so it worked out perfectly. Yeah. It's just that I don't know how, I look back, I don't know how I did it. Yeah, we were younger then, but still, you know, yeah, it makes a difference. Yeah. So, any other questions? I'll proceed. So this is towards the end of the introduction, then we're going to get into the meat of the Global Peace Building Foundation. So, I'm on page 6 of the handout, if anyone's following them, at the bottom of the page. We learn as we go along in life, and our life experiences shape us. I was blessed with so many angels throughout my life, teachers, coaches, mentors, spiritual advisors, and role models all unselfishly provided me with guidance and encouragement. Their stories are forever embedded in my story and in my heart. They lifted me up when I was down. They instilled a desire in me to help others, just as they helped me. These collective experiences over 5 decades provided me with a solid toolkit to launch the GPBF and to begin to help building peace in the world. My GPBF journey has provided me with a breadth of learning experiences. My adolescent years were a walk in the park compared to the suffering and trauma experienced by too many of the world's youth and children. Like so many things in life, especially peace building, that is something we must see to believe. My belief in community has been reinforced too, along with the critical role of mentors, coaches, and teachers. I've learned that pure altruism has no strings attached, that volunteerism brings happiness and purpose, that little things can turn into big things. I'm sure many of you can agree with all that. Yeah. Most importantly, I've learned that all of us as ordinary citizens of the world individually have the power to change the world. It is within our grasp. The title of the book, Within Our Grasp. Whatever difference you want to make is possible. Offer your time and talents in ways that best speak to you. You will play an important role in making the world a better place. Of course, change takes time, takes a long time, and the results may be intangible and difficult to measure. But you cannot quantify how human encounters and human experiences transform each of us. The peace-building leaders running the GPBF grantee organization serve as a testament to this. They are in it for the long haul because they see young people transformed by their programs. This in turn continues to inspire me, and I hope it will inspire you as well. There are a few existential questions I feel we must ask ourselves in order to live a meaningful life. How do we want to be remembered? What will be our legacy? Will it simply be career accomplishments and accumulated wealth? Or will we be remembered for our time commitment to others, for having nurtured our relationships, and for the meaningful contributions we made in our community and the world at large? This final paragraph is something that I just really realized through writing the book. Future generations will be affected by what we do now. Not only our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, but future generations of the children of the world. Think about that. It is an awesome responsibility. But with our hearts and our minds in the right place, we are more than capable of living up to it. So, any other questions at this point? Or we're going to jump right into some stories from the Global Peace Building Foundation. So, I'll explain something. How did Phyllis and how did we get through this? And so Phyllis, it took her about 10 years. And she hung in there with me, but she was skeptical, and she was resentful, naturally. And she had a right to be, really, but she started to believe it when she saw it. And then she kind of changed her whole approach. So how she saw it was, we went to Belfast, Northern Ireland, and we spent a week of a due diligence trip. I call it due diligence trip. That's my CPA background talking. But in the banking industry, they call that kicking the tires. So you want to go and watch what's going on. Your grantee, you're giving them money. Are they doing what they say they're doing? So no better way is to be there, and we spent a week in Belfast. So I'll read a little bit about that. And have any of you been to Belfast, Northern Ireland? You have? Yeah. When were you there?
Early 90s.
Okay, so you were there during the Troubles.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we'll reference the Troubles. Did you raise your hand? Or, oh, you were there. When were you there?
Many times
Many times. So
over
you-
the last 15 years.
Oh, gosh. Well, you want to come on up and help me
No.
with this? Okay. Yeah. So it was educational. I read a book about the Troubles before we went there, but there's nothing like being there, on the ground. So this is on page 165 if you're following along. Phyllis and I spent a week with Peace Players International Northern Ireland, the PPINI, Peace Players International, in May 2013 to get an upfront and close sense of the area's culture and the history of the conflict there. She and I were aware that a fragile peace had existed since the Good Friday Agreement was signed on April 10th, 1998. The Good Friday Agreement had put an end to the most recent violent period known as, quote, the Troubles, a 35-year period characterized by bombings, police clashes with protesters, and guerrilla warfare. As Phyllis and I walked the streets with our tour guides and drove through the city with the talkative taxi drivers, you learn so much from the taxi drivers, it's unbelievable. The tensions that remain under the surface were brought to light. You could feel it. You could feel the tension. Signs of the 300-year conflict between Catholic nationalists and Protestant loyalists are ever present. Neighborhoods distinguished by flags and murals are physically separated by peace walls, 30-foot high walls of concrete and steel chain fences. The newest wall went up as recently as 2002. So I'm on page 166 if you're following. The walls have been turned into artworks of commemoration, nationalist and loyalist pride, and dark warnings. Our taxi driver pointed out all the Ulster Union and British flags marking the territory as we drove through the Shankill. Is it Shankill? Is that how you pronounce it, Jim? Shankill neighborhood?
I don't know what you're talking
Yeah.
First paragraph.
Yeah. Is it?
about. Yeah, Shankill.
Shankill, yeah, neighborhood. As we met and talked with the PPINI staff, we learned that 94% of schools in Northern Ireland are still segregated. 94%. PPINI works with 20 different schools to bring students from different sides onto the same basketball courts. So that's how they integrate the kids through basketball. And they also have a substantive peace education curriculum that accompanies the basketball program. Phyllis and I visited a couple of gymnasiums that integrated Catholic and Protestant students by teaching them basic basketball skills such as dribbling and shooting. The basketball programs were supplemented by experiential learning sessions about prejudice, sectarianism, and peer pressure. In these programs, young people learn how it feels to be discriminated against. One of our most significant observations was how a couple of the Catholic boys answered no to the question, is the act of Catholic boys throwing rocks at a Protestant boys' bus sectarianism? The rationale of their answer was based on their experience that Protestant boys threw rocks at their bus. Megan Lynch, an American fellow working on PPINI's staff for 1 year, explained to us how PPI's peace education curriculum is woven into each school's personal development and mutual understanding curriculum. The teachers at these schools, the teachers rely on PPI to answer the young students' questions about sectarianism, thinking that PPI is better prepared to address the topic. We also had the opportunity to meet with Trevor Ringland, he assisted me in my thesis during the organization's, quote, Spring Jam basketball tournament. He commented, "We work on peace every day." Just wondering, how are we doing on time? Does anyone, so,
It's around 2 o'clock.
okay, so we have till when, 2:30? Jane, do we have till 2:30? Do we have another half hour?
I don't know. I mean, this is fascinating. It's up to how long people, if you're willing to,
Oh, I am. I just don't want to run over it.
if anybody needs to leave, it won't be rude. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just, I'll let Nancy.
I have a question
Yeah.
about how you found this PPI group to give them the money. Did they reach out to you, or did you
No.
read about them or hear about them? How did you know they were doing this basketball thing and that you wanted to fund it?
Okay. Great question. And again, I was led by the Spirit. One of Phyllis's best friends growing up, Kathleen Rooney, they went to Fonbonne Academy together. I don't know if anyone remembers Fonbonne Academy, the all-girl Catholic school. So Kathleen Rooney's father, Dan Rooney, of the Steelers, he and Tony O'Reilly started the American Ireland Fund back in the 1970s while we were in college. And so I reached out to the American Ireland Fund, part of my thesis research. And I was looking for an organization like Peace Players to write, to research and build into my thesis. So we had a break during the Fletcher School academic year over Easter, over in April, like a spring break. So Phyllis and I flew to New York, and I met with Phyllis and I met with the American Ireland Fund there. And it was at most 10-minute meeting. And I told them what I was writing about, researching, and if they could help me find an organization that, so within a few days after we returned to Pittsburgh, I got a list of organizations. And Peace Players caught my eye because it's basketball and that's one of my passions. So anyway, that's how we found them. And then this Trevor Ringland, I interacted with him via emails, one phone conversation, and he provided me a lot of good material and insight of what they were doing. So I built it into my thesis. And then when we set up the foundation is when they became a grantee, and they still are to this day. Yeah. So, and things like that have happened all through the last 14 years. You know, we find organizations. We get so many people, organizations all over the world looking for help, and they don't meet our criteria. We're strict to that. The contact theory is a main criteria. If they don't operate under the contact theory, we don't, well, I'll interact with them and tell them what we're looking for. But we want to maintain integrity to what we're doing. So thank you for that question. Yeah. So I'll proceed if we're okay. Okay. And we really only have I don't know, maybe. These are cut up in excerpts. I'd say it's probably only 5 to 7 more pages that we can go through, but I think it's worth it. Yeah, okay. The stories are what, the people and the stories and what they've experienced, like, as I said, in my adolescent years growing up in Bethel Park were a walk in the park. Really? Geez. So at the bottom of page 166, we also had the opportunity to meet with Trevor Ringland. Okay. Trevor shared his story with me. He's a partner of Macaulay and Ritchie Solicitors, one of Northern Ireland's leading law firms, and the chairman of the board of directors of Peace Players Northern Ireland. This story is just unbelievable. But he is also the son of a Northern Ireland policeman and one of Ireland's most famous former rugby players. Two backgrounds that have spurred him on to become a voluntary peace builder. When Trevor was 12, he was searching for a pencil when he found photos of maimed men and women burned in a bomb attack. He never forgot what he'd seen, and even though his parents worked hard to give him a normal childhood, the conflict kept rearing its head. Trevor says, quote, "We lived a normal life growing up, but it was just in abnormal circumstances." Launching into stories about the times he and his family lived out of the police station in Larney. We came out of the police station one night and the IRA appeared and started shooting. My father dived under a car and a gunfight went on for 2 hours. Meanwhile, my mother got a call saying that homes of police families were being attacked. This happened the same night. Trevor's father, Adrian, would go on to check his police car for bombs each morning, and his mother would check to see if anyone was at the door before leaving home each day. As a police family, they didn't just receive threats from the IRA, but also from Protestants who consider them too protective of Catholics. This made it impossible for Adrian to watch his son's rugby games from the family section in the stands. Instead, he'd watch from a distant corner in disguise. This didn't stop him from cheering on the team, though, nor did it stop him from calling out referees when they made a poor call. Quote, "My father took out the stress on rugby referees," says Trevor with a half smile. "They were a bit of counseling service for him." As Trevor grew up, his rugby talent earned him spots on some of Ireland's most competitive teams. On the rugby pitch, whether you were Catholic or Protestant mattered little compared with whether you were a great team player. In 1985, he led Ireland to defeat England, Wales, France, and Scotland in a Five Nations rugby championship. Trevor took his experiences working across religious divides on the field into his professional life, working to build a campaign on creating a genuinely shared future with one small step, lending his now famous name to peace-building efforts and collaborating with the American Ireland Fund to identify peace projects to fund. It was the last of these that led him to Peace Players International, an organization that uses sports to build a global youth movement for peace and equity. And then he goes on to describe, Peace Players is such a simple example of how things can be different in Northern Ireland, Cyprus, the Middle East, North Africa, Rwanda, and the United States as well, Trevor says. It shows that the norms can be challenged so that barriers are broken down. Teachers and parents get involved, and then it has a wider impact on the local community. This is the impact. Trevor has been the board chair of Peace Players Northern Ireland since 2009 and has seen the program's students grow from children to adults. One of the Belfast communities he's seen change is a neighborhood where a Protestant primary school and a Catholic primary school sat on opposing sides of the same road. The first time we brought the kids together, they had to travel in separate buses to a neutral venue. Imagine that. They're in the same street, but they have to use separate buses to get to a neutral one. Trevor recalls. Some parents even tried going to their lawyers to get it stopped. And then, within 10 minutes, we had them running together, the kids. They were completely mixed. Now the schools travel to practices in the same bus. The kids play on mixed teams, and their parents attend games together. See that? Amazing, isn't it?
Okay.
That's open. Yeah. And then, this is what I got the biggest kick out of, when he said, Trevor said, maybe I took too many kicks in the head, but it's the right thing to do as well, says Trevor, talking about how long it took to get Northern Ireland and Peace Players to where it is today. Despite the region's history of conflict, Trevor remains a firm believer that Northern Ireland's citizens want peace. And I really believe that. Yeah. Don't we all want peace? All I have ever experienced across the island of Ireland were people who were welcoming, he says. We got relationships so badly wrong the last 100 years. Let's get them right the next 100. And then we also met with Gareth Harper, who's the managing director of Peace Players Northern Ireland. And he shared with us that over the years, he's another person that's been in for the long haul. He's been there several years. Gareth told me that over the years, he has seen several of the organization's alumni go on to careers in human rights law, conflict transformation, and various other fields due to their involvement with PPI-NI. He said, it's on page 169 if you're following. Every day I witness the power of young people who push this place towards a better, more shared future, he said. I have been close to tears of pride and joy on numerous occasions. One such individual is Naim, who joined PPI-NI when it first started programming in Northern Ireland back in 2002 and worked her way through the tiers to become a current coach. Naim's Catholic primary school existed in the middle of a Protestant neighborhood and was subject to picketing and protest. PPI-NI worked with Naim's school and the neighborhood's Protestant school a mere 50 yards away to build a primary school twinning program. Primary school twinning is the foundation of PPI-NI's cross-community intervention. The program engages children aged 9 to 11 in pairs of maintained predominantly Catholic primary school with a controlled predominantly Protestant primary school for 90-minute sessions during the school day. So we went to a couple of those. We were there when they did this. Kids are having fun. They don't see difference at all, you know. And he goes on to say she was a real success story. He said we are working to create hundreds of names who in turn work with thousands of Catholic and Protestant young people across Northern Ireland to bridge divides, develop leaders, and change perceptions. As Phyllis and I departed to return to Pittsburgh, we were full of excitement and optimism about the future of Belfast and Northern Ireland. And we realized that it's going to take generations to transform that part of the world into a more peaceful environment. PPI-NI is one organization that is working at the grassroots level with youth and children to affect their attitudes and shape their perceptions differently than prior generations have done. So I'm very hopeful for the future there and everywhere with these types of programs. And then the final, in 2012, Phyllis and I, she accompanied me.
I'm just gonna be sure
Yeah.
everything's unplugged in the kitchen.
Oh, okay. Phyllis and I made another trip to one of our other grantees and also one of my thesis case studies, Seeds of Peace. And they operate a international peace camp in the state of Maine. So we spent a day at this camp. It's nestled on the shores of Pleasant Lake. The camp has the look, at first glance, of an ordinary traditional summer camp, with a beach, soccer fields, basketball courts, housing units, and a dining hall. The camp serves as the programming foundation for Seeds of Peace. It is designed to be a holistic and powerful human experience. For 90 minutes of intense dialogue each day, the participants discuss and share their pain, anger, fear, hatred, and other core issues of conflict. These dialogue sessions are supervised by Seeds of Peace trained facilitators. Recreational and team-building activities, like at a summer camp, balance the remainder of each day. The young people, 14 to 15 years of age, are chosen by their respective governments, typically through the Ministry of Education. The governments must give consent for the young people to participate. Thousands apply, but only 300 applicants are selected through an extensive series of exams, essays, and interviews to represent their countries. The young people come as mini ambassadors from their respective countries, and there is much prestige involved. As Phyllis and I strolled the camp, several participants came up to us to share their transformational experiences. Upon Rihanna's arrival from Afghanistan, she shared the apprehension of others, yet she felt open to the sharing and learning experiences. The camp, she said, she told us, the camp helps us to change our mind and to see other people from the other side, to make friends for ourselves. Maddie from India told us, quote, when people from home tell us that we can't get along with people from the other side, I'm going to show them a picture of all of us together. Hadi from Palestine said, I'm going to try to treat everyone how Seeds of Peace treated me. We were equally inspired by the dedicated counselors working at the camp. Moose from Egypt attended the camp 6 years prior. Now back as a camp counselor, he reflected on what he'd learned. As a young man coming here, meeting the other side, a lot of Israelis, Jordanians, and Americans, it was a different experience because you actually get a chance to be friends and to live with them for 3 weeks, he said. You listen to what they have to say, they listen to what you have to say, and you get to engage in dialogue and talk about it, and then run around in the same soccer field, playing the same sport. A bunk counselor shared this observation. There are so many small moments, like brushing your teeth together that first night when campers first get there, when you see the discomfort, and then the last night, they are clinging to one another, not able to let go. As Phyllis and I drove back to Pittsburgh, we were mindful of the challenges these young people would face when they returned to their home countries. And were again confronted with the bitterness of conflict. We were comforted to know that year-round regional programming exists in their home countries and acts as a support system. For instance, Israeli and Palestinian graduate participants, referred to as seeds, meet throughout the year in small dialogue groups to continue to listen with respect and tolerance to the opinions of the people on the opposite side of the conflict. Other opportunities for seeds to build on their transformational experience at the camp and further the development as leaders and advocates for peace include local workshops, community outreach efforts, community service projects, regional seminars, and global summits. So while I was researching in my thesis for Seeds of Peace, I met a woman by the name of Eva Gordon. Her married name now is Eva Gordon Armour. And she was located actually in Boston, but she's worked for Seeds of Peace ever since she was in college. She started as a counselor and now she's kind of like one of the big wigs. So I interviewed her, and then a year after, when we first started the Global Peace Building Foundation, I went back to the Fletcher School and we interviewed her again. And this video is actually on our website. But she shared with me a very powerful story. And I write, as I reflected again on Eva Gordon Armour's powerful revelation that she'd shared with me during my thesis research. Eva had been working as a counselor at the Seeds of Peace International Peace Camp. And within a week's time, a young Israeli woman had befriended a young Palestinian man at the camp. The young Israeli woman came to Eva one evening and was sobbing, hysterical. She explained that her Palestinian friend's cousin had been shot by Israeli soldiers in the West Bank and had died. The woman cried out, "You don't understand. This isn't just another Palestinian. This is my friend." And Eva went on to say, it was at that moment that I realized the power of just knowing someone. Eva had told me, it doesn't become them. It becomes my friend. It becomes this person, another human being. And it is those very human experiences, those human encounters that change us. She says, it changed me. And then she pointed to me in the interview, in the video, and she said, it's changed you. The young Israeli woman was remarkable, she had continued. She stuck through it, and she has been involved in a number of peace-building efforts and is currently getting a PhD in peace building, now 11 years later. And Eva said, ultimately, this is what will bring about real change in these countries. So one challenge, a big challenge that I came across in my research and over the last 14 years with the Global Peace Building Foundation is a need in the United States. And
Can you hold the microphone?
I'm sorry. Is a need in the United States and many, many parts of the world, I believe, need to quantify. How do you measure what you're doing? Does it make a difference? We rely on metrics a lot. We want to quantify. In the peace building philanthropic field, the sector is very underfunded because of this reason. For this reason, is you can't quantify. So I addressed that, and I wanted to share it with you. So we had early in the first year of the foundation, we invited two people to one of our first few board meetings, and one was they're both from this area. One was a banker in the financial field. The other was I would call a philanthropist. Anyway, they were talking to us, and they said the banker said, how do you measure? How do you measure the grantees, their success and the outcomes of their work? And the philanthropist commented, it's a no-brainer that this work is beneficial. And the banker noted, the GPF should tell donors how success is measured. I wasn't surprised. Inevitably, when I give a presentation, I can always count on that, I call it the $1,000,000 question. Someone will raise their hand, and I said it comes in various forms. How do you measure the outcome? How do you know it works? How do you know if the programs are successful? How do you know if it makes any difference? And this is a huge challenge for the GPBF and the peace building field in general. In our culture, there exists a strong scientific reliance on quantifiable data to measure outcomes. But a lot of the gains central to peace building are hard to quantify. The lack of tangible, hard data is a real detriment in attracting donor dollars. M. Scott Peck writes about this in his book, The Road Less Traveled. How many of you read that book, The Road Less Traveled? Yeah. I just happened to reread it over the last few years, and in this I quote this in the book, in my book. The use of measurement has enabled science to make enormous strides in the understanding of the material universe. But by virtue of its success, measurement has become a kind of scientific idol. The result is an attitude on the part of many scientists of not only skepticism, but outright rejection of what cannot be measured. It is as if they were to say, what we cannot measure, we cannot know. There is no point in worrying about it. We cannot know, therefore, we cannot be measured. Let's see. Therefore, what cannot be measured is unimportant and unworthy of our observation. Because of this attitude, many scientists excluded from their serious consideration all matters that are or seem to be intangible, including, of course, the matter of God. And then I write, we cannot quantify how our human encounters, our human experiences transform us. We must be open to the Spirit, look for and welcome the Spirit, the grace of God. We cannot measure that, and science cannot measure it either. That is more than science can provide. That's a sermon right there. The GPBF grantees are planting seeds that ripple out in unknown directions, not expecting to get direct, concrete feedback on their actions. They know that is the act of planting the seed that really matters. They do, however, have significant anecdotal evidence of the transformational experiences of their program's participants. Take, for instance, Mika Hendler, a 2004 Seeds of Peace seed. Inspired by his camp experience, Mika founded the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, JYC, in 2012. They're our newest grantee. We started researching them last summer, and I had conversations with them about doing the due diligence, and then October 7th happened in Gaza. And you know, I called them after that, and they're still operating. And immediately after that, they couldn't, they have the checkpoints where you can't get anywhere. So they resorted to have their sessions, Israeli and Palestinian youth in a chorus, and they were doing it via Zoom. It didn't stop them. So he's a graduate of Seeds of Peace. He started his own program. A choral and dialogue program for Palestinian and Israeli youth in Jerusalem promotes a space for these young people from East and West Jerusalem to grow together in song and dialogue, giving its participants a voice. And we know that when one mind is changed, when one heart is warmed, a ripple effect occurs. The work of a few affects the lives of many. This is what the GPBF hangs its hat on, the ripple effect. Alexandra Holian, a Swiss writer, said, quote, "It is like the rings in the water when you toss a pebble. At first, the circles are very small. Then they get larger, and finally they embrace the entire surface of the ocean." The ripple effect. That's my story. I hope I did it okay. Time-wise, okay? So, do you want to have, are there any questions, or do you have any clarification so far? Yes?
I don't know, what is your organization, Seeds of Peace, or
No?
what are you?
Here.
And what does GPPS stand
I'm not soliciting, first of all, but I wanted to give each of you a. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not soliciting for donations or anything, but if you, I'm gonna give you each of you a card that has the website, the name of the organization.
Okay.
It has my email address, it has my phone number. So if you have other questions, or if you wanna delve into it, it's all there for the website. We have, I put this, every year we send out a letter to people that are on our contact list. And we've raised so far, and what I say, relatively small dollar donations. When I say small dollar, $100, $200, $250 donations. We've raised $150,000. And 99% of the money coming in has gone to programming, to our advocacy, our due diligence, and grants. We have no overhead, virtually, other than we have to pay for whatever costs there are for the website, things like that. I have not taken a penny in compensation from the outset, and I do not intend to ever take money. A significant portion of the book, the proceeds from my book are going to be put right back into the Global Peace Building Foundation. So I'm very hopeful from what I've seen of the world. The Middle East, I'm very hopeful. It's hard to be hopeful, but I see what I'm hopeful for are the future generations, future leaders in the world. My ideal situation would be a Seeds of Peace graduate, an Israeli and a Palestinian graduate of the Seeds of Peace program becoming leaders and representing the Palestinians and the Israelis. Then you would make progress with that. This field, this peace building field, the grassroots, local, community level field is relatively new. Seeds of Peace is, I think Seeds of Peace now is 30 years old. Peace Players International, I believe they're approaching 25 years old. So in the big scheme of things, they're young, they're young organizations. So, and that gives me hope as they grow, So, that was, any other questions or comments, or I will put these around.
You have business cards with you?
Yeah, right here, several, so.
How about if I put them on the table
Yeah.
on the way up?
Sure,
There's another saying,
yes.
if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
There you go.
You're not part of the problem. That was
Thank
a
you.
treat. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. I'm honored to be here. Yes. And I really enjoy your listening and your participation. It makes a big difference, Alan Foster used to tell me when he was giving a sermon, he'd look out to the congregation, and he knew he was in trouble sometimes when people were. I was lucky today, I didn't see that. And by the way, this all for me, my spiritual journey started at Southminster Church. And the Bible study was huge. The Cell Bible class was huge. And people like Alan Foster, Pat Albright, Ken White, they're throughout the book. Their influence was unbelievable. So, thank you, Southminster.
Well, thank you for the very wonderful program, and
Oh, yeah, my pleasure.
we wish you, it's just beautiful what you're
Yeah, well,
doing.
everybody's interest and support makes a difference. Yeah.
Okay, I will put these out on the table, and please come and have some dessert, or
Okay.
take a baggie, and
All right, thank you.
everything's out, thank you.
And I have more cards in case, I just gave her a handful, but, and I'll hang around if anyone else wants to talk.